Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here on Let's Talk Stroke. And I'm so glad that you're all joining me, and I have an amazing, spectacular guest, and not only a stroke survivor himself, but a stroke educator, Dr. Thomas Broussard. So why don't we just go ahead and get started? Good morning, doctor. How are you?
Hi, Jerry. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm terrific. I just want to make sure that you can see the comments that are coming up.
I can. I like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Salute. Tom and Jerry. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Carolyn, how you doing?
Yeah. Do you know Carolyn? Oh gosh, I forget a lot. Having a stroke and all this kind of stuff. Forget, but I think Carolyn, you are a speech pathologist.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is. Yep.
Yeah. There is our good old friend. Salute. But I'm so glad that you're here. It really makes me happy. Talking to you before. It's just we had a great time chatting. So, what I wanted to do is people that aren't completely what you're all about. I mean, we all know stroke educator. Everybody's so excited to see you and hear what you have to say. But you not only a doctor of you're the stroke educator, but you had stroke.
Yes.
So you know all about this stuff. Can we
hardly?
Yeah. Can we start like before? Who was it was Tom before your stroke, a Navy vet.
So yes, I before my stroke, like all of us, before anybody has a stroke, we are who we are before the stroke.
Right.
After our stroke, unfortunately, I'll say unfortunately, but after the stroke, you're pretty much tagged as, oh, you had a stroke. You're a stroke survivor if you're lucky.
Right.
But they don't talk much about who you were before the stroke, which is interesting because before the stroke has a lot to do with who you were after the stroke.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about that. They're not gonna, like you do. You said you were always happy. Jerry, I should tell this to everybody, Jerry, he's always happy. He doesn't do this just because. He is always happy. And then the next thing would be, Jerry, were you always happy before your stroke?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So an awful lot of who you are after the stroke has an awful lot to do with who you were before, and all of the work and habits that made you who you were all before your stroke are those same habits that are still there inside of you that allows you after the stroke, without necessarily even consciously looking for those habits that you used to explore, although now I do help people, I do encourage people to go looking for those habits that you had developed before and use them again. Not like you have to go find it and use it again. If you just study what had happened to you before, you begin to, oh, that is who I am. I am still that way. If I keep doing those things then, but do them now, I will probably get better. So again, I'm just using you as a happy person. You're always a happy person. And that is who I happen to be. Whatever I was before, I just happen to have done those same things going forward.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm really so happy that you're here. I know that you had the TPA, right?
I had the TPA with my first stroke. That's a whole nother little chapter of everybody who had a stroke.
Right.
Because in my case, I got better. My right side was paralyzed in my right arm, and I couldn't see from the right side, but I did get that drug, TPA. And within about 3-4 hours, and I eventually went to sleep. I woke up a day and a half later, and I woke up with everything better physically, not yet knowing that the TPA doesn't affect you with aphasia. But TPA has its own chapter, because my younger brother 2 years younger than me. He had a stroke 2 years ago, and he, yeah, and at the time they thought he was having just a TIA, so they weren't going to give him the TPA. But the nurses and doctors, as they saw him getting admitted, they could see that his stroke was going like this. It's going down, and then it would come up, down, and come up. And they said, "Oh, it looks like he's having a full-blown stroke." They gave him the TPA, and it didn't work.
Wow, interesting.
It didn't work. So he woke up the next day for him, and actually all along the way, because he really didn't fall asleep. But the TPA didn't work, and he is now paralyzed on the left side of his arm and leg. Although, like you, tremendous amount of therapy, as you have done. So he's much better with his leg, and pretty good with his left arm and hand also.
So he had an ischemic stroke, because typically, that I understand, when you have your if you have the stroke like I did on the my left side, it affected my right side, and that most people that have a hemorrhagic stroke on the left side, it causes aphasia because of the communication. That's what I understand, even though I'm not the stroke educator. So.
Yeah, it's the brain is an amazing device, an organ, and it has a map, and the map is still so, I'll say, not relatively unknown, but still unknown enough that wherever that stroke is in your brain, and the damage and the age and the motivation and so on, it because the brain maps not only one set of maps, but it actually has redundant systems in the brain. I've read about it. They say there's at least 11 redundant pathways everywhere doing everything. So yes, you can think 90-some% of people with stroke on the left side have difficulty on the right side. But you have some people have the stroke on the right side, and you have things still on the right side. I mean, sometimes you don't know because of the intricate, when there are trillions of contacts, trillions, they have lots of ways to get around, lots of ways.
Yeah. So how does the brain repair or rewire itself? How is it able to do that?
Well, a couple things, and it is always interesting. I might happen to be a doctor, but I'm a Ph.D. research person late in life, and
he's talking about me. If you're seeing that, Mike, knock it off.
Yeah, I know, Jerry. I would listen to Jerry all the time. I don't have to talk.
No.
Yeah, you just listen to Jerry. Jerry's a great guy, and I've known that for a long time. He is a great guy.
Thank you.
So what was so ask your question again. What was I talking about?
We're talking how the brain, because I think I know, but I really don't know, because how the brain can really repair itself or rewire itself.
Right. Well, if you were asking a neuroscientist or a doctor, meaning MA doctor, not a PhD person like me, they would start to drive it for you from the way the brain physically works. They're going to say, oh, well, this is where it is. This is how it happens, right? They're going to talk about that. But when it comes to explaining to people who stroke and aphasia, you've lost your language, it is much more complicated than just saying, oh, you lost your language. So that's at the top of the doll. If it's a Russian doll, the top is you lost your language. You pop that open and you say, oh, reading, writing, speaking. But it's much more complicated, because when you lose your language and then you cannot, let's say, speak, there's still some things that you can communicate. Even if you can't speak this way, you can still draw, have body language. There's lots of other ways you can communicate.
Right.
So when it comes to plasticity, and now talking, really, I use a lot of metaphors to help better understand how plasticity really does work. When it comes to plasticity, it really comes as a result of what they call experience-dependent activity. So experience-dependent neuroplasticity. All the things you do on the outside to like we're doing with this interview.
Right.
It doesn't matter, you know, I've been working on this since my stroke, which is almost 10 years. I have gotten better over time. But at the beginning, if you had invited me on your interview 9 or 10 years ago, I would not sound too good.
Me too. I mean, 10 years ago.
Exactly. What turns out is that it is the effort
Yes.
of getting better. It isn't just getting better. It is the effort itself. It is the action verb that happens to have this capacity to induce plasticity. The plasticity is the creating and altering neuromatter such that it converts the thought and cognitive activity into neuromatter. It is just like photosynthesis. It is just like that. It converts light into sugars and green leaves. That's how we convert with photosynthesis. The same thing happens with plasticity. It converts thought and cognitive activity into neuromatter, brain matter. That's what plasticity is all about. So the more of this on the outside, you get more of that on the inside. So if you need to recover and you can't read well, speak well, whatever it might be, you have to do those very same things.
Right.
And the function is also the cure. So you do it badly, it will get better because that happens to be the function that they have inside of ourselves and inside of those cells and the neuro networks.
Okay. Yeah. So now I see Mike Peters has a question. I think we touched on this just a little bit ago, Mike, if you were paying attention. Okay. Just kidding.
Mike too.
That's my time. But wasn't this, we touched about this?
Is there a connection with which side of the brain you have your stroke on is more likely to get aphasia? That's the question?
Yes.
Yes. And the answer is yes. Most of the time, if you have a stroke on the left side, you're more likely to have aphasia as a result of that. Right. So if you have a stroke on the left side, it is likely to be upwards of 90+% that have aphasia.
Right. Okay. And it's great. So I'll keep going. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just good. If we get into aphasia, because that's I think as I said, I ordered because my neurologist retired and has we have a new one. So I wanted to get all my records. And I never really knew 3 years ago. I just had a speech problem. I just forgot to mumble. My wife is used to me just being, just mumbling around. And
yes,
but I said aphasia in my records.
Yes.
I was like, aphasia.
Aphasia. What
is aphasia? I know there's different types.
Right. There's all kinds of different kinds. But really, it's just a loss of language as a result of all kinds of different ways that it occurs. In my most recent book, it describes some of the additional ones, the different kinds of aphasia, and they too have their own characteristics.
Right.
So that makes it, again, interesting. I say interesting because the only thing I really know is what I had experienced myself, and then I write about it. So yes, and practice happens to be a large part of how that works, and that usually is, So now I see. So this is great that they have all these notes that are coming up all the time. What's interesting though is that I would say for all of you guys, you would probably say that makes noise such that I'm reading that, so now I can't speak what I was about to say. That's very interesting. What's really cool is we could just see what's happening and then answer those questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you say that, I try to answer, then it comes, I go, oh, that's good. What was I saying?
Yeah. So this is so 10 years, 12 years out of, or 10 years, you still, you have, I want to say that you have aphasia, you do? You have a, right? I guess, because this is, for me, same thing, looking at the comments, trying to answer them. So I'm forgetting what I'm thinking of and wanted to ask you.
Yes.
But it's good to see so many people want to, some of these just,
yeah.
I didn't get it.
Yeah, I still have aphasia. People who know me or watch my work or see it on YouTube, they think that I'm, well, once they see my YouTube, they'll go, oh, he's not perfect, because I stumble all the time. You stumble all the time, Jerry, I love you. As a matter of fact, when my brother had his stroke, he didn't have trouble with his language. On my case, of course, I could only had trouble with my language. So we printed a T-shirt that says the Stumbles and Bumble Act, and a picture of the two of us, because he stumbles, right, and I bumble.
Wow.
And we like that. So we made one presentation up in Philly with the two of us of the Stumbles and Bumble Act.
Yeah. I've never seen that shirt.
Yeah.
And then we talk about this. I know it's, I have the not the newest version.
Yeah, you have the first edition.
Right.
And the reason that I changed the title is that aphasia is still so completely, other than the stroke world, are so completely are unaware about aphasia, even in the stroke world. So unless you connect stroke to aphasia, like I said before, sometimes people look at aphasia and say, oh, is it a religion? Is that another country somewhere on the other side of the world? They have no idea.
Exactly.
But because if my ABCs of aphasia, if people see aphasia, they go, I don't know what that is. Even if they have stroke people in their family or have it themselves or actually have aphasia, but nobody ever told them that, you have to actually put in a stroke primer, and then at least they go, oh, stroke must be related to aphasia. So that is why I did that. And from now on, all of my books will always have stroke and aphasia in the title, because otherwise people will continue to not know.
Right. I know you I don't know if you, I'm pointing at it, but can you see right here? Those are the 4 books. I can't see. Corner if everybody can see it. Stroke Diaries.
Oh.
The 3 Stroke Diary books, plus there's 2 now, ABCs of Aphasia.
Yeah.
And your books, like I see some of the comments, they're on Amazon, real easy to get. At least for me, I ordered on Amazon.
Yeah, you can go to my website too, educator.com, and then you see all the books, and then you click them, they go straight to Amazon too. So you really have to connect stroke and aphasia. Believe it or not, I am a national volunteer for the American Heart and American Stroke Association. And when I started working with them, of course, they want to talk about stroke, right? Because the 2 organizations, American Heart and American Stroke, are now together. So in the stroke side, they were just talking about stroke. And I said, well, I can't talk about what happened with me. I had 3 strokes, but what's most important is this thing called aphasia. And they somehow know what it is. And I said, well, I can't not talk about stroke and aphasia. And they said, okay, go ahead. You can do whatever you want to do. Put it up on their website. So if you go to the American Stroke Association, because I'm a national volunteer, you'll also see me as a what do they call me? Anyhow, you'll see my picture there, and you'll see all my work talking about stroke and aphasia, trying to help them understand that since 40% of people with stroke get aphasia, don't leave us in the cold talking about how great stroke people are. But when you're done with us, these centers of excellence with stroke, that doesn't mean you don't have aphasia. You're just leaving us. Go somewhere else. We really don't care what that is. Now, I'm being sort of cruel. I don't mean to do that at all. But the truth is, if we're not connected, then we're not connected. And as a result, we go floating away. And that is why 7% of the US population, based on a survey by the National Aphasia Association, says that we are aphasia aware. 7%. As opposed to the fact that 40% of with stroke have aphasia.
Right. How does that work out?
Yeah, well, I've been working on this, I say 10 years, but not true, 5 years with my work. And I am just starting my next 5-year plan, because I just finished my 5-year plan, finished my 4 books. My next 5, I'm going to be much more of an activist. I've been an author and an advocate for 5 years. Now I'm adopting that I'm becoming an activist. So we need more work around the country through our political systems, our hospital systems. The fact that the American Hospital Association, if you go to their website, you could do that. Everybody should do that now. Go to your website on the American Hospital Association, go to the search box, put in the word stroke. You'll get hundreds of hits on stroke. Put in the word aphasia. If you're lucky, you'll get 1.
Okay, you guys do that.
And that is the American Hospital Association. You might get 1 citation, 1 hit on aphasia. That's not right. That's absolutely not right.
So is that what, because I know you have a aphasia awareness campaign.
Yes.
That you're doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Nationally, that's
nationally, trying to get to all 50 states. Yeah, I've gotten to 26 so far.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to know about aphasia, and I don't know anything about it. We talked about when I've had some guests on, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing when I'm interviewing them that really have such bad aphasia. And I don't mean to be, they're bad. It's just aphasia is cruel, and lots of times they have their significant other or daughter, somebody, and they know. Let them figure it out for a few times, right? And then the daughter will jump in, or the mom will look at and says, maybe you can answer that for me. So is that the correct thing that we should be doing?
Yes. I'm writing it down here. So is not the same. It's not the same as not helping. When it comes to that exact thing, Jerry, what you just talked about, if you have significant other or caregivers or family givers, and they start basically doing work for you, as it were, until you, meaning the person with aphasia, gets to the position of asking for help if they need the help, it is best for the person with aphasia to do the work, because, quote, doing the work, going back to what I said before, it is the effort itself is the cure. It is the practice itself that is the cure. So you have to practice a thing that is bad in order to get better. So yes, and the title of another article I'm working on, it is called "Withdrawing Help is Not the Same as Not Helping." Withdrawing help is not the same as not helping. So a lot of people, because we're human, we want to do it on your behalf. We really do. We really do.
Yeah, for sure.
I have to sometimes, because I also have a grandson who had CP, cerebral palsy, and he looks like anybody with stroke and aphasia. He actually looks exactly that. His right side is difficult. He's done really well on the physical side. His language is bad, getting better, but he looks exactly like a person with stroke and aphasia. So I teach him full time every week, although truth is he has so many other therapeutic interventions that I only see him 2 or 3 times a week for 2.5 hours working on his language. It really, I have to sometimes, when I know what the answer is, I have to say myself, basically stifle yourself and not tell him, he has to do it on his own. And sometimes he's frustrated because he just wants you to tell me the answer. No, I can't tell the answer.
Yeah.
It really is up to you. So withdrawing help is not the same as not helping.
Wow.
And helping people emotionally who otherwise they understand, they want to do what they can for the loved one.
Right.
You also take the next step and say, oh, I understand loving my loved ones is better that I don't do this work because that is how plasticity works.
Wow. That's incredible. You know, I had somebody, and I don't even know if this is the right place to say it, but dystonia. Are you familiar with the dystonia? With a muscle disorder? Because someone asked me, well, Dr. Broussard talk about dystonia. I didn't even know what that was. The muscle contracting.
I guess I've heard of it, but no, I don't know.
Yeah, totally understand. That's yeah, because I know. Did I just say this? I'm so bad at, or maybe I said it before we were live about, you know, my wife has not a problem. She's so used to me thinking I just mumble, and every morning she makes these shakes for me, and I didn't know what I was saying, or maybe I just stumbled on my words. And she goes, you know, I don't know what you're saying, and I'm going to put more ginger in your shake, which she knows I don't like ginger. So, but anyway, it's, oh my God.
When it comes to mumbling,
Right.
when it comes to yeah, I like that. Strategic listening is what I say. Yeah, that's very well done. Do I get to see all of the comments eventually that I can?
Yeah, afterward they still stay there.
Okay.
So
I mean, I can print them so I can print it and see them or something.
Oh yeah, you can see. I can't do it right here, but yeah, you can actually print them, because if you watch the replay or whatever,
okay.
There's so many. I don't know how many comments there are, but
because that one there that just flew by, the strategic listening is good, because that of course means that person who's doing the watching is more astute at thinking, I should only say what I want to, or interfere when I need to, and that's what strategic listening is.
Right.
Teresa, yeah. So that's very good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that Mike Peters, he's actually lives in South Wales, United Kingdom, and he's always you can see that comment there.
Yeah, the emotional thing is, you know, let's go back to the Russian doll, the nested doll. You know, the emotional component. If you actually think that you have a nested doll, and you think that when you lost your language, that's it, right? That's the outermost doll.
Right.
As Mike said, well, you forgot that there's an environment that actually lets the planet, or the planet in this case of a doll, there's an environment that actually is here above the doll, and that's emotion. Because at the end of the day, nothing happens with these dolls, whether it be the outermost doll and all the other deficits below, but there's still an environment above the doll. Right. And that environment is the emotional doll that you can't even see. And it is incredibly difficult for you. It's incredibly difficult for your loved ones, your spouse. It is all very difficult on the emotional side too, for sure.
Oh, I know. We always talk about that with stroke survivors who are on the show. You know, how do they handle the emotional part, especially ones that live alone, or you know, not to just sit there and sulk. I mean, how can you not do that? I would think, but this community, like we chat with all these great folks out here, it really makes a difference. Like my my stroke support groups, especially because I don't go to the hospital or wherever, which I used to talk to stroke survivors and tell them, you know, it does get better. And,
yes.
But
practice. Well,
yeah.
Now back to what Mike said about emotion, what we just talked about. If you go to the 5 rules of most therapy, usually speech therapy, but any number of therapy, there's only these 5 rules. Now we go back to the emotion. The first one is motivation. Second, practice. third, practice, fourth, practice, 5, practice. So it turns out practice is what the dolls do. Motivation is what the environment provides for the dolls to work. And that's what happens. And it's, you can do all the work in the world on their behalf, but if you aren't also dealing with the emotional side of it, will continue to be difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know. I saw that Cheryl. How we all have those days. You know, now on this count, I have those days when I'm like by myself, but I don't show it. But I still have if I'm watching something. See, now sometimes I go different, like you said, I'm reading here, but I'm still going in a different direction. And that's what happens to me here at home. Start to talk, and then someone may interrupt, and then I'm lost. I just kind of give up what I was going to say.
Yes, yes, you know? Yes.
But yeah, Mike.
Yeah, and Carolyn also mentioned a minute ago about dysphagia. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. About the fact that often contributes to the mumbling from aphasia, based on the muscles are weak and difficult to control those muscles. So that physically contributes to the mumbling, as opposed to when you have aphasia and you mumble, but it's not really because I can't move the muscles, but I'm mumbling because I can't really get to usually the longer words, because when I want to say pronunciation, I couldn't say the word pronunciation. It wasn't because I couldn't say it. It's just I was sliding from one letter to another, and I knew I wasn't getting to what I wanted to say, so it came out sounding bad. So yes, you can have dysphagia and still have aphasia, and both contributing to the fact that you are, quote, mumbling, as it were, with some part of that being driven by the muscle component, and the other part being based on the language component that allows you to still have the same defect that still looks the same to anybody on the outside.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I thought I mumbled just because of my wife.
That's right. I'm not listening.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm listening. I just can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So true. Yeah. Wow, good for you, Tammy.
Still, once a week.
Yeah.
Oh, well, your shows with Jerry is your therapy once a week. Is that what you're talking about, Jerry?
Yeah.
Tammy?
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
Tammy. Maybe that's what it is, because I do these Tuesday and Thursdays. Yeah, Lynette. Yeah, we read in the comments. I know Salute says I should be always reading the comments and not have a dead space, but Salute, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite the story. But yeah, so it is amazing that you so you have a new book, any new books that are coming up?
I'm working on the next book. Wow. And it is called Stroke and Aphasia Recovery.
Okay.
Metaphors Help Us Mend.
Wow.
Metaphors Help Us Mend.
Wow.
I'll probably put an article out in the next month or two, basically describing what the book is going to look like. And I've started making presentations. I did one 2 days ago with the hospital in Vermont, about metaphors help us mend. Right. Because when it comes to all of us who only really are experts in understanding who we are ourselves, right? When we talk to our doctors, they're describing it from their perspective of who we are, and which is really that tip of the iceberg for sure. And using words that, unless you become a neuroscientist, it's difficult just to understand the words, right? But they're describing how the brain works with dendrites and synapses and any number of things, myelinated fiber, getting more and more scientific. So the metaphors help everybody, whether you have a stroke or not, we all humans use metaphors all the time, but
Right.
especially when you are have aphasia, then I've created, without knowing that I was creating these metaphors that would help us better understand how it is when we see those deficits, because we see the deficits, we see it ourselves.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is help us better understand what seeing those deficits looks like metaphorically, because it's still incredibly difficult to try and describe yourself or have someone else describe themselves scientifically what it is that's wrong with me. So these metaphors help a lot.
Wow.
I have tried, this book will have about 15 beautifully done, beautifully images about how metaphors really do help us mend, based on metaphorically how it is that when we see any number of things in our daily life, that then convert over into how we understand how the brain works. And if you looked at any of my articles, you'll see quite a few of them already. Whether
yeah. And you talk about dendrite. Dendrite. Am I saying it right?
What's that?
You talked about. I heard you say it. Dendrites and I know it's not coming out right.
Synapses.
Synapses and.
Yep. And myelinated fiber.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It growing new leaves or branches.
Yeah, well, right. When you have a stroke, you lose X number of cells.
Right.
They're gone. They're never coming back. The interesting component is, though, that the remaining cells right here, they have this capacity called plasticity to grow more. Now we'll use the metaphor of plasticity and photosynthesis. They grow new branches and leaves. The leaves are the learning field, right? Those leaves, meaning those synapses, they're the trillions of them. That's where the learning occurs. The rest of this is structure, although there's a lot more that goes into the structure, including the transmission component of it, but it's still structure. But you only have the remaining, the cell,
right?
And then these dendrites, and then synapses, they grow and basically repair or weave in additional synapses and dendrites, creating or recreating or re-knitting the language, such that those neuro networks, which obviously had lost enough that the capacity to speak properly fell below the level of the critical mass, now they build it back up, finally reaches critical mass again, based on all those activities we talked about in practice. Now they're back over the top and now can speak better, if not perfectly, going forward. And that, again, that's what plasticity does with the remaining cells. The others are gone, but these have that capacity, tremendous capacity, because you and I both, we know what we were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We could not do this. And it isn't like somebody just gave you a shot and all of a sudden you do these things. It happens based on practice and the way the brain uses that to convert that into neuro matter.
Wow. Yeah, it is incredible trying to figure out all these things. That how do we figure them out? But obviously have to talk to professionals as yourself, because I never knew. I mean, I knew I had aphasia just recently, maybe 3 years ago. I didn't know what's aphasia. I'm so glad I got my records, because I saw he wrote in the notes aphasia.
Yeah.
And then I just looked it up, and it's like, why didn't maybe they did tell us in the hospital what this is aphasia. You have aphasia. Because I talked to you about it a while ago about I learned with a keyboard.
Yes.
And people are probably saying, what's that mean? But like my keyboard here, I have. And when I was in speech therapy, I knew I was going to speech therapy, but I was very frustrated. Find just for instance, the H. I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. And then, okay, let's try the Z or something. Couldn't find it. And that was a part of my speech therapy. But then about a month or two later, I could find the H, but I couldn't say it.
Wow.
So I don't know what that's called, but all I know is that's what I went through. Maybe that's 10 years ago. That's how they did it. who knows?
Well, those deficits, now we get back to the nested doll, which is another good metaphor, and you'll see it in some of my work, based on how you could theoretically write with your hand. That induces a certain amount of muscle activities based on your hand, right? Based on your head, based on what you just saw or thought about. I'll
hide the comment.
I know. I'm watching Carolyn and I missed it.
Sorry. I know these. I know. When you make comments, guys, can you make like one word comments? No.
Good, Carolyn. So tell me again, Jerry, what were we just talking about? This is a good one. Tell me. Oh,
I know it was.
Oh,
the keyboard.
Back to the difference between writing with your hand and now hitting the keyboard.
Right.
So there are different pathways to get from one thing to another, from the inside to the outside. If there's one set of roads to speak, that's one set that gets there. One other roads to get to your hand, other roads to get to your hand, but seeing. So that's, you have to see it. That's another road to get these, to see this, to actually do something. So they hold these different roads. Remember the redundant capacity of the brain? There's at least 11 redundant systems. Well, if any number of them are damaged in different ways, you have to practice all of them all the time, because you really yet don't know how that's going to induce plasticity that helps with the road to get to your keyboard versus being able to see the letters of your keyboard, right? So you have to keep doing any number of things as you used to do prior to your stroke. Do it again, because it will drive different pathways to get with plasticity to get to these different activities. Otherwise, you really won't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. Some of these comments here, and yeah, you'll be able to go back and take a look at them. Okay, so these long ones here. So we knew Tom had a speech language disorder. Her husband is, I don't know if you follow her. Her
husband,
Speech therapy right away. Yeah, speech pathologist knew that I was going to be able to continue working with Tom at home. Yeah.
So he does it all the time.
Yeah. It's
interesting, right?
Yeah.
So many friggin' roads. It's interesting because we become part of this. Road is 11 brains. All of us in the community, meaning you, Jerry, and me, and Peter, and any number of other people. Yeah. You get to see who we are. So I see Salud and Tom regularly.
Right.
Not able to talk much or anything else. Exercise, but having these opportunities to communicate like this helps all of us, and we get to build relationships with everyone, even if we don't get to talk on our day-to-day basis. But you get to see the name, you get to see what people are doing. Clearly, all are doing highly therapeutic activities. All of that means we're, quote, all getting better, as they say, with the boats rising with every tide. Right?
Exactly. So that's
true. So good luck to Tom and Salud.
Yes, for sure. I talk to them all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, best exercise to increase neurogenesis in your opinion?
All those books can break down separately. Yes.
Yeah.
There's two, basically together. Best exercise to increase neurogenesis in your opinion. And then it's back to Carolyn. Just put that up there. Can you put that up there too? Put those two together, basically, or just put up Carolyn's. Talking about the fact that all these modalities can break down separately, which is incredibly true. The modalities, well, language, speech, language pathology, listening, etc. Then within each of those modalities break into their own individual deficits.
Right.
And they might appear to look the same in terms of their symptoms. They're not really driven by the same issue, right?
Yeah.
So when people say that you're not listening, and as as if it's a physical issue, not like you, Jerry, with your wife. Maybe you really aren't listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My wife hears this all the time, but she's not here, so you know. But there's any number of things. I'll pick one called rise time. Rise time. Yeah. So some people have heard about rise time, but not many in the aphasia world. However, it gives you the same symptoms as if they are, quote, not listening. Rise time is the additional time, it's also called slow rise time, to convert from passive to active listening. And with people with stroke and aphasia, because time is always the issue, normal people operate at conversational speed at 10 to 20 milliseconds. People with stroke operate at 300 to 400 milliseconds or longer.
Wow.
So people say, well, yeah, a second's a second. It's all pretty short. No. 10 milliseconds versus 200 milliseconds. That means I am 30 times slower than you.
Right.
You think that has an issue?
Yeah.
It sure as hell does when it comes to conversational speed.
Right.
So when it comes to rise time, it takes about a second to convert, especially if you are sick with aphasia and stroke, to convert from passive to active listening. So what has just happened is, if your wife just said, go get me the car, and you got as far as, I heard the word car, but I don't understand what's happening. You said, well, you're not listening. I could not hear those words at all, because in that 1 second, it's about 3 to 4 words.
Thank you.
And it goes away all the time. And yet the speech language pathology don't use the word rise time. They don't use that. Why? Because the therapists have to learn so much in those 2 years they have to learn as much as they can. And then they have to go on for another 20 years to begin to understand there's so many more things with these sub-modalities that they might not even find rise time until years later. So I've had many SLPs have come back to me and saying, oh my God, Tom, they're 20-year SLPs, never heard of rise time. It isn't because they're to blame, it's because they have to learn so much. But that is why you're, quote, not listening with all different modalities with similar symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we overcome that one?
Yeah.
How do we make them more understanding?
My time. So one of my chapters in one of my books talks about rise time. One of the issues is as soon as you get as soon as you know that somebody's talking to you and you missed a couple of words, but now you know about rise time, all you have to do is send out an alert. As soon as you hear it, I do it all the time with my wife. She starts talking. She was talking. I knew I'd missed. This is today.
Wow.
She missed those words. As soon as I hear her talking, I go, what was that? That's all you have to do. That's an alert. You just have to say, sorry, missed that. You just have to say it, and they'll start over, because humans do that too.
Right.
Within a second, you now realize you just hit the 4th or 5th word she said out of her mouth. You say, sorry, and she starts over.
Right. Yeah. Right. Oh, Mike.
Yeah. I know. I see Mike. Yes.
Yeah. Giving a new excuse.
But there's an alert.
That's true.
There you go. So Carolyn knows about rise time.
Yeah. So and Teresa's never heard of it.
Most people haven't.
Yeah. So they have to buy your book.
I actually experienced it in the process because I was creating the evidence. And I did talk about evidence being very important. So I happened to save all the evidence of the world around me, as bad as it was, still having it as bad as it was, still provided the evidence I could use later when I had more ability to understand the evidence I had provided. But when I became aware of this thing called rise time, I became aware of this whole issue, and I wrote it all down and continued to study it, knowing that it was me and my wife, and there was noise, there was TV on, I'd turn that off, say, what was that again? Doing all that. Finally, it took me 2 or 3 years before I finally came across, not the word rise time, I still never heard, I came across this definition from this one particular person that Carol and I both know. He's the one who pretty much figured all this out. And he wrote it down exactly. I mean, he actually said, and he showed the curves, and he said, it's clear that you have lost the first 2 or 3 words because of the transition. He wrote this whole thing down. I go, rise time. I told my wife, I told everybody, and now I've been studying this because that was exactly what I had experienced and saved the evidence that allowed me to understand that.
Wow, that's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
this is great.
It's a huge field, huge. You can study that for your whole life and still not really know.
Yeah, this is funny. Yeah. Well, it's been great. I mean, you've enlightened me every time I talk to you. I'm learning something new all the time. And
you make me happy all the time.
Oh, you're so good. Yeah, anything, because I know we're about near the end here. Anything, last words of wisdom that
I don't have any words of wisdom. If there are more questions that people are looking for, we can do that for sure.
For sure. Is any other questions, you guys? Come on. Yeah. How often do you get to see hear from Dr. Broussard? I mean, this is
Tom. Yeah, Tom Broussard.
Yeah. Tom. So Tom, is there any? Oh, let's see. No, I'm trying to see. Oh, okay. So let's see this one here. I don't know if Mike's got a question. My sense of smell and hearing are heightened since stroke.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Heightened.
And Mark Garman, let's see. Do you believe neuroplasticity is achieved at a greater rate with making the brain think and how to do an activity different than the way you did it before?
It's achieving a greater rate with making the brain think, or how to do an activity different from the way we did it before. That's the great set of question from Mark. On the one part, of course, the more you quote think, there's an effort component to thinking. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
The more the effort, the more it generates plasticity, meaning it generates more neuro matter. That's it. I mean,
wow.
I mean, because now we go back to motivation, which is a bigger word. If you're not motivated, there won't be the effort that's needed, right? Yeah. So when you think, and sometimes you say you think harder,
right?
We use that all the time. That is part and parcel of what we do when we are trying to figure out a problem we have to solve. Except in my case, I would say my case, because everybody is completely different, and sure. And we're in this spectrum, and I am had done very well with less severity than so many others of my friends. Right. So unfortunately, I continue to just refer to myself because I can't come up with anybody else's other than the underlying understanding of how the brain works.
Right.
Coming at it from my perspective. But as he was saying, is that as you think or think harder, that is an effort. That is a component of motivation. The other one that he mentioned is, how about going into other activities that might be even better, as it were? Well, it's there's another thing that is I use this thing called underload. If there's a truck going up a hill, you move it into a lower gear, and you can feel the engine running, and it's running hot, but not necessarily hot in a bad way. But it is now working harder.
Right.
So if you find yourself looking at something that is new mentally, that means you are creating the effort to go for this new mountain, this new thing you have to drive. You put into lower gear, you feel the additional, quote, pressure as you move in that new direction. All of that is effort. All of that creates plasticity. It does that. So yes, in either case, it does contribute to neuroplasticity. On the other hand, if you don't do any of those things and you watch TV,
right,
yes, you get a little bit of boost, but not much.
right.
There is a different characterization of effort required. Watching TV is one. Doing any other thing, reading a book, is
Right.
10 or 20 or 30. Thinking about something you hadn't figured out and you have to make it work.
Sure.
Effort goes way up. Watching TV is still down at 1.
Wow.
You learn something really new about history, okay, make it 2. Because it still goes in through your eyes and
Yeah.
comes right in, as opposed to reading something which requires a lot more physical activity with the brain, and
Yeah.
the way it actually brings in information, given the way the brain and the eyes actually work.
Wow.
To absorb the information that comes in through the eyes. So it requires more effort, and more effort, more motivation.
Yeah, and this is a question I always, I mean,
Doctors.
yeah,
How do we get our primary doctors? I had my primary doctors in Florida till I came up here to Maine. I can't wait till I get my new doctors here, and they're finally going to ask, so what do you do? And I'll tell them about what I do, and they go, don't know much about this thing called aphasia. And I start giving my books. So in Florida, one of my doctors, well, several of my doctors had heard about aphasia, but they were quite excited. They wanted the books. I gave them books to all of them, and to their various hospitals. I said, see, you guys are the PCPs, and you don't know anything about aphasia.
Yeah.
Help me help you, help me help you, right? The wider public, of which you PCPs know everything about everything. Somehow we have to figure out how the doctors and hospitals can better create that environment for
Right.
the wider public, of which there are hundreds of millions of the public who do not know and will never know. Nobody's ever going to tell them. It actually has to come from this public consciousness, and that means an environment. Yeah, that friggin' mountain. I have another book coming out. Actually, you guys need to sign up for my stuff. I have a new article coming out. I do hope it's going to come out next Tuesday, and it is called, this is the one who said that friggin' mountain?
Yes.
It's coming. Here's what it's going to come. This is coming next Tuesday. This is the proof that many times. It is called Aphasia Recovery, The Hill We Climb, by the National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman. And we are talking about, just as she said, that friggin' hill,
Right.
that friggin' mountain. That's what we're talking about, but I'm using the metaphor of the hill we climb from that beautiful poet at the inauguration a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, at the end of after the show's over, if you have the a link or the and I'll put a link to all your books in this, so people go back and order the books. And
and my articles are all on strokeeducator.com. You'll see and that'll come out next Tuesday, about all those friggin' mountains, except I can't really write it down that way. Although I do like it being that friggin' mountain, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's cool. All right. Well, hey, I know it's now 11 o'clock my time. I'm glad you guys like this show. And you know what? Thank you, Tom, for being here. This is
Thank you, Jerry.
Awesome. I mean, I can't wait to tell my wife, to tell her, okay, what?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
What was that?
Tom said I could do this. Oh, so funny. All right, you guys, enjoy climbing that friggin' mountain.
That's true.
Thank
you, Jerry. Thank you, everybody. Jerry, we'll have to talk about, as I become an activist, whether I might enlist you to become one too. You're already doing it, but we have to do some additional things with the political system to help us move forward.
I'm here all the time. I'm a phone call or chat away. You know that.
That's right. All right. We'll talk.